The first thing I heard when I opened my eyes was the library printer choking like it had swallowed a secret. Not a clean mechanical whir, not the sleepy little cough it made whenever someone printed lecture slides at midnight, but a harsh, grinding sound that clawed through the silent study floor and dragged me out of death. For 3 seconds, I thought hell had fluorescent lights. Then I smelled burnt toner, old carpet, instant coffee, and the lemon disinfectant the cleaners used on the desks every morning at 6. My cheek was pressed against a stack of embryology notes, my hand cramped around a blue highlighter, and across from me, under the green-shaded lamp near the reserve shelves, my roommate was slipping my library card into the front pocket of her blazer like it belonged to her. Mira Voss did not look like a thief. That was the trick. She looked like the girl professors trusted before she even spoke, the girl who cried with perfect timing, the girl who brought homemade cookies to tutors and remembered the names of librarians' children. In my last life, she had smiled at me with those soft, wet eyes and said she only needed my card for one night. One night became one semester. One semester became an investigation. And by the time finals ended, my name was on a misconduct report, my scholarship was frozen, my mother's voice had gone thin over the phone, and Mira was standing on the dean's honor platform with answers she had borrowed, stolen, polished, and fed back to the world as her own. I remembered dying 3 months later in a city bus accident, my backpack still carrying the rejection letter I never opened again. Yet there I was, alive, breathing, and watching the same scene happen before it ruined me twice. The printer coughed again. Myra's fingers pressed my card deeper into her pocket. I lifted my head, wiped a line of highlighter from my cheek, and said, calmly enough to scare both of us, "Give it back." Mira froze with one hand still on her blazer. Around us, the 24-hour library had that strange exam week silence where everyone pretended not to hear anything but heard everything. A boy in a hoodie stopped flipping flashcards. A girl with red-rimmed eyes paused her recorded lecture. Even Mrs. Bell, the night librarian, looked up from behind the circulation desk, her glasses sliding to the tip of her nose. In my previous life, this was where I had laughed awkwardly and let Mira win before the fight even began. I had told myself it was embarrassing to accuse a friend in public. I had told myself she was stressed, desperate, harmless. I had told myself smart girls did not make scenes. Smart girls swallowed discomfort and called it kindness. That version of me was kind all the way to the academic appeals office. Kind while Mira said she had no idea why my card logs showed hundreds of suspicious accesses. Kind while my student portal turned red with warnings. Kind till my own life no longer recognized me. But rebirth does something ugly to fear. It burns off the polite layer. It leaves bone. Mira blinked, then smiled, tiny and wounded, as if I had slapped her instead of asking for my property. "Lena, what are you talking about?" she whispered, using the soft voice she saved for witnesses. "You said I could use it. You always say I can use it." That sentence was the knife. Always. She was building a history in real time, laying down a road she could drag me along later. I stood, my chair scraping sharply against the floor, and held out my hand. My library card. "Now." Her eyes flicked left, right, measuring the room, collecting faces. Then, with a shaky little laugh, she pulled it out as if she had only been joking. The plastic was warm from her pocket. My name, Elena Marrow, gleamed under the scratched laminate. I took it back and slipped it into the inside zipper pocket of my bag, the one I had ignored in my last life because I trusted people who liked to stand close enough to learn my passwords. Myra's smile did not fall immediately. Girls like Mira never let things fall in public. They lower them slowly, like curtains at the end of a performance. "Okay," she said, still soft, still wounded, still making sure the room heard. "I didn't realize you were going to be weird about it." In the old timeline, that word would have worked. Weird. Difficult. Dramatic. Ungenerous. Those tiny social traps had controlled me more tightly than any locked door. I would have rushed to prove I was normal, generous, easy to love. This time, I zipped my bag. The sound was small but final. "You realized," I said. "You just thought I'd be too embarrassed to stop you." The hoodie boy's eyebrows lifted. Mrs. Bell straightened. Myra's face tightened, just for half a second, and there she was, the girl behind the girl, sharp as a broken mirror. Then she covered it with a tremble. "Finals are in 4 days," she murmured. "I'm behind. I thought we were friends." The word friends landed on the desk between us like something spoiled. In my last life, friendship had meant I lent her my card, my notes, my umbrella, my spare charger, my student ID when she forgot hers, my essay drafts when she just wanted to see structure, my silence when she flirted with my lab partner and blamed me for tension, my reputation when her borrowed answers were traced back through my login. Friendship had meant Mira consumed, and I apologized for having less to give. I looked at the printer, where 30 pages sat in the output tray, each stamped faintly with my student number at the bottom because the library system printed user IDs on restricted reserve material. My stomach went cold. She had already started. I walked to the tray, lifted the pages, and saw the heading, Finals Integrated Case Bank, Closed Reserve Access Only. In my last life, this was the seed. This was how my ruin had grown roots. Mira reached for the stack. I moved it behind my back. "These were printed under my account," I said. "So they're mine now." The silence changed. It sharpened. Myra's eyes widened, but not with guilt, with calculation. "Lena," she whispered, "don't do this." I almost laughed because I had heard that sentence before, only in a different room, at a different volume, after everything was already burning. "Don't do this," she had said when I threatened to tell the committee she had used my login. "Don't do this," when I found screenshots of my notes in her cloud folder. "Don't do this," when I asked why her final practice answers matched the private annotations I had written in blue ink at 3 in the morning. Back then, I had been shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. This time my hands were steady. That was the first miracle of rebirth, not knowing the future, not dodging tragedy, not seeing hidden enemies before they struck. The miracle was getting one clean chance to become someone who did not beg a liar for permission to defend herself. "I'm returning these to Mrs. Bell," I said. "And then I'm changing my library pin." Myra's expression flickered.
There.
The second seed. She knew about the pin. She had not only been borrowing my physical card, she had been using the online access tied to it. In the old timeline, she had told the investigators we studied together, so often that our work naturally overlapped. She had said I must have left my login open on shared computers. She had cried, of course, and tears did what evidence could not. People looked at my blonde exhaustion and her delicate panic and chose the prettier story. But this time, she had made one mistake. She had reached into her pocket while I was watching with memories sharpened by disaster. Mrs. Bell took the pages from me, with lips pressed thin. "Closed reserve materials are not to be printed without individual authorization," she said, glancing from my face to Myra's. I gave her my card and asked for a transaction history. Mira made a tiny sound behind me, a hurt inhale designed to pull sympathy like a hook through water. "Are you seriously reporting me?" she asked. "I'm securing my account," I replied. "You can report yourself if you want." The hoodie boy coughed into his sleeve, and I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. It was childish, maybe, to feel satisfaction from that. I felt it anyway. Mrs. Bell scanned my card, frowned at the screen, and her fingers slowed. In my last life, I had never requested the logs until after the misconduct notice arrived, and by then half the trail looked like mine because Mira knew my routines, my study hours, my favorite computers. But now the timestamps were fresh, stupidly fresh. Access at 11:42 p.m. from Terminal 6, while I had been asleep on my notes at Table 14. Print request at 11:46. Database download at 11:49. Attempted remote login at 11:52. Another at 11:53. Mrs. Bell's gaze lifted. "Were you at Terminal 6? "No," I said. She was. Mira stepped forward, face pale. "I was just helping her. She asked me to print." That old familiar trap again, quick as a snake. She did not deny. She absorbed. She turned theft into service. I looked her directly in the eye and smiled for the first time since waking up alive. "Then you won't mind if we check the camera above Terminal 6. It was not a guess. In my last life, the camera had existed, But the footage had overwritten after 7 days because I waited too long, because I trusted an apology, because I let Mira explain away the smoke while she poured petrol under my door. Myra's lips parted.
No tears came this time.
For a second, she forgot the audience, and fear showed plain on her face. Mrs. Bell called campus security, not the dramatic kind with sirens and radios, but a tired man named Mr. Kerr, who looked as if finals week had personally aged him. He took our names, asked for student numbers, and listened while Mira transformed herself from thief to victim in under 90 seconds. She said we shared everything. She said I had been under pressure. She said I sometimes forgot what I agreed to after long study sessions. She even touched my arm and said she was worried about me, which made my skin crawl so hard I nearly stepped back. Nearly. But rebirth had taught me the cost of retreat. I stayed still and let her hand sit there like evidence. "Please don't touch me," I said, loud enough for Mrs. Bell and Mr. Kerr to hear. Her fingers vanished. Mr. Kerr asked whether I wanted my card canceled and reissued. In the old timeline, I had kept the same card because the replacement fee felt wasteful. I could almost see that younger me counting coins, making tiny economies while Mira stole entire outcomes. "Yes," I said. "Cancel it now. Also reset my library pin and revoke all active sessions." Mrs. Bell nodded with the grave satisfaction of a woman who had been waiting years for a student to use the correct words. Myra's breath hitched. That was when I knew the title of my second life would not be written by destiny or karma or some heavenly judge. It would be written in access controls, timestamps, and the beautiful little phrase, "Revoke all active sessions." Somewhere in the system, every borrowed answer Mira had opened under my name would begin to vanish from her reach, one permission at a time. At 12:18 a.m., the first message hit Myra's phone. I heard the buzz, because the whole room had gone quiet again. She looked down, and the blood drained from her face. She turned the screen away, but I had already lived through the aftermath once. I knew the shape of panic even without reading the words. Session expired. Authentication required. Access denied. She swallowed and tried to look bored. Another buzz. Then another. Her tablet lit up inside her open tote bag. The screen showed a document with a gray banner across the top. Permission removed by account holder. I had spent my first life thinking revenge would be loud, maybe a courtroom, maybe a speech, maybe everyone gasping as the villain was dragged away. Real revenge, I discovered, could be almost silent. A system recognizing its owner. A password changing. A stolen door closing while the thief still had her hand inside. Mira reached into her bag and tapped at the tablet. Too fast, too hard. Her nails clicked against glass. "Problem?" I asked. She looked up at me, and hatred flashed so bright I wondered how I had ever mistaken it for friendship. "You're being cruel," she said.
No, irraplia.
"I'm being accurate." Mr. Kerr cleared his throat, perhaps to hide a smile, and told us both to return to our dorms while the report was filed.
Mira instantly seized on that.
"Great," she said, voice shaking. "Let's go home and talk like adults." Home. As if our dorm room had not been the place where she photographed my handwritten flashcards while I showered, where she practiced crying in the mirror before meetings, where she once asked me whether my mother could afford tuition if my scholarship disappeared. I lifted my bag. "I'm not going back with you." That surprised her more than the card. Mira had built her power on proximity. She needed to be close enough to borrow, close enough to overhear, close enough to edit memory before anyone else could record it. When I said I would spend the night in the women's study lounge and request an emergency room change in the morning, she actually laughed. Not her pretty laugh. A dry, ugly snap. "You think people are going to believe this little act?" she whispered as Mr. Kerr spoke to Mrs. Bell. "You think one library card makes you untouchable?" I looked at her, really looked, and felt the strange ache of seeing someone clearly after loving the blur. Mira had never needed to be smarter than everyone. She only needed to be shameless in ways polite people could not imagine. That was her advantage. But I had memories from a life where shame killed me slowly long before the bus did. I did not carry it anymore. "No," I said. "I think one library card proves where to start." Then I walked out with my canceled card in my pocket like a dead snake and my new temporary access slip folded in my fist. The campus was blue with winter midnight, the kind of cold that turned every breath visible. Behind me, Myra's phone buzzed again and again, each vibration a tiny funeral bell for the answers she had never earned. The women's study lounge was on the third floor of Hallberg Hall, wedged between two vending machines and a window that overlooked the courtyard statue of some founder nobody liked. I had slept there twice in my first life during exam week, curled under my coat while Mira used our room for private calls that were actually meetings with the same people she later convinced I had cheated. This time, I did not sleep. I made a list. Not a dramatic revenge list with names circled in red, though I will not pretend the idea did not tempt me. A practical list.
Passwords to change.
Devices to sign out. Tutors to email. Logs to request.
Photos to take.
People to inform before Mira could reach them with trembling hands, and a tragic version. At 1:07 a.m., I changed my university password. At 1:12, I reset my cloud storage. At 1:19, I opened my notes folder and found 32 shared links I did not remember creating. My body went cold in a way the winter air had not managed. Link created. Mira Voss. Link created. Anonymous viewer. Link created. MV backup. Some were labeled with my own naming style, close enough to pass if nobody looked carefully. In the old timeline, those links had been used as proof that I distributed restricted study materials. I had cried so hard in the misconduct meeting that I could not explain metadata. I did not know then that truth needed formatting. Truth needed screenshots. Truth needed timestamps saved before a liar learned she had left fingerprints. So I documented everything. Every link. Every access time. Every device I did not own. I downloaded activity logs until my laptop fan screamed. Then I opened a blank document and wrote, at the top, unauthorized access timeline. Not Mira did this. Not please believe me.
Timeline.
Evidence first. Emotion later. At 2:03 a.m., my phone lit up with Myra's name. I let it ring. At 2:04, she called again. At 2:05, she sent a message, Lena, please. At 2:06, I know you're scared, but you're making this worse. At 2:08, we can fix it if you stop acting insane. There it was, the progression I knew too well, plea, concern, insult. I screenshotted each one. Then came the voice note. I almost did not play it. In my first life, Myra's voice had been a hook in my chest. She could make guilt bloom in me even when I was the one bleeding. But the lounge was empty, the vending machine hummed, and I needed to know how desperate she was. I pressed play. Her whisper filled the room. Lena, I'm sorry if I crossed a line, okay? But you know I needed those case answers. Everyone uses shared material. Don't pretend you're above it. If you report this, they'll ask why your account had access in the first place. They'll ask why your notes match mine. They'll ask why you let me use your card before. You won't come out clean either. I stopped the recording and stared at the phone. My heart was beating fast, not from fear but from recognition. In the old timeline, she had said those words face to face with her hand on my knee, and I had believed the threat. Now she had gift-wrapped it in audio. I saved the file 3 places, then typed one response. Do not contact me except through official channels. I blocked her number. The moment I did, I felt something inside me unclench, some old cord cut at last. Morning came gray and hard. At 7:30, the campus coffee cart opened. At 7:32, Mira arrived wearing a cream sweater, no makeup, and the face of a girl who had been crying beautifully. I watched her from behind the glass doors of student services as she approached 2 girls from our cohort, Sasha and Priya, near the fountain. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Sasha hugged her immediately. Priya looked uncertain. I could not hear them, but I did not need to. I knew the choreography.
Mira would say she was worried about me.
She would say I had snapped under finals pressure. She would say I accused her over a card after begging her to help print materials. She would never mention closed reserve access, revoked sessions, anonymous cloud links, or the fact that her tablet had been cut off mid-theft. In my last life, By the time I tried to explain myself, the emotional truth had already settled over everyone. Mira was gentle, Lena was unstable, and the misconduct report merely confirmed what people had been prepared to believe. This time, I did not run into the courtyard yelling facts like a madwoman in a dream. I waited my turn at student services, submitted an emergency housing request, requested a formal account security review, and asked the staff member to note that I had reported unauthorized use before any misconduct allegation existed. The staff member, a brisk woman named Alana, looked at my printed timeline, then at me. "You prepared this overnight?" she asked. "I had motivation," I said. Her mouth twitched. She stamped the intake form. That stamp sounded better than applause. By 9 a.m., the first rumor had reached the lecture theater. I walked in through the back doors and felt 200 stressed medical science students look at me without looking. Finals did strange things to people. Normally decent students became territorial over mnemonics. Friendships thinned under fluorescent lights. Someone would sell you a coffee and hide a past paper in the same breath. But scandal during finals was a feast. It gave everyone a break from their own terror. Mira sat in the middle row, surrounded by sympathetic faces, a tissue balled in one fist. When she saw me, she flinched so delicately that even I almost admired the craft. Professor Ainsley was setting up the revision lecture on the front computer, unaware that half the room had already chosen sides in a battle she did not know existed. I took a seat near the aisle, opened my laptop, and did something the old Lena would have considered rude. I ignored the whispers. Not because they did not hurt. They did. I felt each one like static against my skin. But hurt was no longer a command. It was just weather. 10 minutes into the lecture, Professor Ainsley announced that the final exam would focus on applied reasoning, not memorized case bank answers, and a small ripple passed through the room. Myra's head snapped up. I saw it. So did Priya. Professor Ainsley continued, "Some of you have been accessing old integrated cases from closed reserve. Those are useful for structure, but they are not a substitute for understanding. In fact, several answers in the older banks are outdated." It was nothing. It was everything. Myra's borrowed answers had not only vanished, they might have been wrong. I should say here that I was not a genius in either life. That matters. Revenge stories like to make the wronged girl secretly brilliant, secretly rich, secretly beloved by a powerful man who arrives at the perfect time with legal documents and a black car. I had none of that. I had a scholarship, a tired mother, a talent for organized notes, and a dangerous habit of confusing usefulness with worth. In my first life, Mira did not steal from me because I was unbeatable. She stole from me because I was reliable. I attended lectures. I summarized readings. I asked tutors embarrassing questions until mechanisms made sense. I color-coded pathways not because I was cute but because panic had to go somewhere. Mira skimmed, charmed, borrowed, and when panic came for her, she reached for people like drawers. In that lecture theater, as Professor Ainsley moved through endocrine feedback loops and embryological timelines, I watched Mira try to write without her stolen scaffold. Her pen hovered. Her eyes kept flicking to her tablet. Every few minutes she tapped something, frowned, tapped again. Permission denied. Session expired. Authentication required. Those invisible messages were doing more damage than any public accusation. A cheater can survive being called a cheater if she still has the answers. Mira had built a house out of borrowed doors, and I had taken back the only key she knew how to use. After lecture, Sasha cornered me near the stairwell with the righteousness of someone who had only heard one version and enjoyed being needed in it. "Mira is devastated," she said. "Good morning to you too," I replied, trying to step around her. She blocked me. "You can't just accuse people because you're stressed." Priya stood a few feet behind her, arms crossed, listening. In my old life, I would have over-explained until I sounded guilty. I would have handed Sasha my heart and begged her to inspect it for purity. This time, I took one printed page from my folder and gave it to Priya, not Sasha. That was deliberate. Sasha loved drama. Priya loved patterns. The page showed my library access history, Terminal 6 timestamps, and the security report reference number. I reported unauthorized access last night, I said. Before Mira told you whatever she told you. Sasha looked annoyed at the document, as if evidence were an interruption. Priya read quietly. Her expression changed by degrees. Terminal 6, she asked. I thought you always sit at the reserved tables.
Ida.
Priya looked toward the courtyard, where Mira was visible through the glass, hugging another classmate. She told us you asked her to print, because your hands were shaking. I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because Mira had used my first life breakdown as retroactive fiction. My hands had shaken in another timeline, after she ruined me. She had stolen even that. My hands are fine, I said, holding them up. My patience isn't. By noon, the emergency room change was approved. Not because the university suddenly became heroic, but because housing departments understand one language better than morality. Liability. I used it fluently. I wrote that I no longer felt safe sharing a room with a student under account security review who had accessed restricted materials through my credentials. I attached the report number. By 1:15, I had a temporary room in the old postgraduate wing, a narrow box with a radiator that clanged like a ghost, and a window that would not fully close. It was paradise. I moved my belongings while Mira was out, not dramatically, not with music swelling, but with 2 borrowed laundry carts and Priya standing guard in the hallway because she had decided, quietly but completely, that something was wrong. The room looked smaller without my books. Myra's side was immaculate, as always. Folded blanket, framed photo with her parents, motivational quote pinned above her desk. My side had the dents of survival. Tape marks on the wall. Coffee rings. A forgotten sock behind the bin. As I packed the last drawer, Priya held up a small black flash drive from under my mattress. Is this yours? She asked. I stared at it.
No.
My flash drives were labeled with neon tape because losing data was my recurring nightmare. This one was plain. Cold moved through me. In my first life, investigators had found restricted material on my laptop during the review, files I swore I had never downloaded. I had assumed Mira transferred them through the cloud. But maybe she had needed a physical backup too. I took the drive with a tissue, dropped it into a zip bag from my toiletries kit, and wrote the time on the outside. Priya watched me, with wide eyes. You've done this before, she said softly. I almost told her the truth. I almost said, yes, in another life you avoided me because believing me was inconvenient, and I forgave you because I was too tired to be angry. Instead, I said, I learned fast. The flash drive changed everything. A library card could be dismissed as a misunderstanding. Shared notes could be blurred into collaboration. But a hidden drive under my mattress was placement, and placement meant intent. The question was whose intent the university would see. I did not plug it into my laptop. Old Lena might have, desperate to know. New Lena had spent a dead lifetime learning that curiosity, without procedure, becomes a trap. I took it to IT services, asked them to image it without opening files under my account, and requested a chain of custody note. The student technician at the front desk stared at me like I had arrived from a crime show. It's probably just someone's lost USB, he said. Then the owner can collect it, I replied. Behind him, an older IT officer named Dev heard enough to come out of his office. Dev had a face like an unreadable exam question. He looked at my report number, the zip bag, the flash drive, then me. You found this under your mattress? Yes. And you have a room change record from today? Yes. He nodded once. Do not discuss contents with anyone until we verify metadata. I wanted to hug him, not because he believed me emotionally, but because he knew what kind of world we were in. A world where files had birthmarks, devices had histories, and liars hated people who could read them. Meanwhile, Mira adapted. That was the frightening thing about her. She did not collapse when blocked. She flowed around the obstacle. By late afternoon, the rumor had evolved. Now I was not only stressed and unstable, I was jealous. Jealous of Myra's grades, jealous of her social circle, jealous that Professor Ainsley had praised her case presentation 2 weeks earlier. I heard this from a first-year student in the bathroom who did not know I was in the stall. Apparently Lena's been obsessed with Mira for months, she whispered while washing her hands. Like copying her outfits and everything. I looked down at my ink-stained jeans and almost admired the ambition of a lie. When the bathroom emptied, I came out, washed my hands, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. Not tragic, not cinematic. Just a girl with hollow eyes, tangled hair, and a face that had already lost once. For a moment, the old loneliness rose so hard I had to grip the sink. Rebirth had not made me invincible. It had made me aware. Awareness was exhausting. Every text might be a trap, every kindness a transaction, every delay an opening for Mira to rewrite the room. Then my phone buzzed with an email from IT. Preliminary device image completed. Do not access attached hash report unless requested by academic integrity. The drive contains multiple files with creation metadata inconsistent with your device history. I read that line 3 times. Inconsistent with your device history. Not innocent. Not complete proof. But a crack in the wall. Finals week has its own weather system. Time stops behaving. Breakfast happens at 4 p.m. People cry over vending machine sandwiches. Someone starts a rumor that the exam will include renal physiology even though the course is genetics, and half the cohort believes it because panic has no syllabus. In that pressure cooker, Myra's performance began to fray. Small things first. She arrived at the genetics revision session with no printed notes because, as she told everyone, the library system randomly locked me out. She laughed when she said it, but her laugh snagged at the edges. Then Professor Calder asked a simple question about autosomal dominant inheritance with incomplete penetrance, and Mira gave an answer from an old case bank key that had been corrected in lecture 3 weeks earlier. The room went quiet in that special academic way where nobody wants to embarrass you, but everyone knows. Professor Calder frowned. That's a common outdated phrasing, he said. Be careful not to rely on old memorized answers. Myra's cheeks flushed. I looked down at my notes, so she would not get the satisfaction of my eyes. But I felt it again, that dangerous satisfaction, not because she was wrong, but because she was finally meeting the consequences of never learning what she had pretended to know. Borrowed answers are like borrowed shoes. They can carry you for a while, but when the ground changes, they twist your ankle. That evening, Priya came to my temporary room with 2 coffees and an apology. She did not decorate. I believed her too quickly, she said, standing in the doorway. I'm sorry. In my first life, no one had apologized before the damage was permanent. Hearing it early felt almost suspicious, like finding spring in January. I let her in. The room smelled like radiator dust and paper. We sat on the floor because the desk chair wobbled, and I showed her the clean version of my timeline. She did not gasp or perform outrage. She asked useful questions. Who had access to our room? When did Mira first borrow the card? Did I have screenshots of previous messages? Could we identify which shared links were created from which IP range? I watched her brain work and remembered how, in the old timeline, she had become a research assistant after graduation. Of course she had. Priya did not like drama. She liked evidence with straight edges. Why didn't you say no earlier? She asked, not cruelly. I looked at the coffee cup warming my hands. Because I thought being needed meant being loved. Because my mother raised me to share, and nobody taught me the difference between generosity and surrender. Because Myra's sadness always seemed louder than my discomfort. Because girls are taught to fear being called selfish more than being used. I said only. I didn't understand what she was taking. Priya nodded like that was answer enough. The next morning, Mira escalated from rumor to strategy. She emailed Professor Ainsley and copied me. The subject line was so innocent it was almost funny. Concern regarding Elena Marrow's conduct. My hands went cold when I saw it, but I opened it slowly, breathing through my nose. Mira wrote that she was worried my accusations were part of a broader pattern of academic anxiety and interpersonal fixation. She said I had voluntarily shared resources throughout semester, but had recently become hostile and revisionist. She said she feared I might sabotage group study materials before finals. She attached screenshots of old messages where I had indeed said things like, "Sure, use my card if you need the reserved desk, and I'll send you my notes after dinner." In another life, those screenshots had buried me. They made my boundaries look invented after the fact. They made theft look like permission with a bad ending. I read the email twice. Then I noticed what she did not attach. The messages where she asked for my PIN just this once, the voice note threatening me, the access logs, the room change report, the IT chain of custody receipt. Mira had made the same mistake again. She believed emotion moved faster than documentation. She was right, usually, but not this time. I replied only to Professor Ainsley, not to Mira, and wrote, "Thank you for noting this concern. I have an active account security report and unauthorized access timeline filed with student services, library services, IT, and campus security. I am happy to provide documentation through official channels." Then I attached nothing. That part mattered. Evidence is not confetti. You do not throw it into a room where your enemy is still standing. Professor Ainsley requested a meeting that afternoon. In my first life, meetings had terrified me because they felt like judgment before trial. This one terrified me too, but terror did not steer. I arrived with Priya as a support person, a printed timeline, and a folder organized so neatly, it looked like I had been planning a war since childhood. Professor Ainsley's office was full of plant cuttings in cloudy jars, which would have been comforting if I had not remembered crying in that same chair while she looked at me with tired disappointment in the old timeline. Back then, she had said, "Elena, patterns like this are hard to explain away." This time, before she could speak, I placed the library report, password reset confirmation, security reference, housing request, and IT receipt on her desk. "I'm not asking you to decide anything right now," I said. "I'm asking you to preserve records before they expire." Her expression changed. Professors live in worlds of evidence too. They just forget students can bring it. Priya sat quietly beside me, taking notes. Professor Ainsley reviewed the first page, then the second. "You are alleging unauthorized access by Ms. Voss?" she asked. "I am reporting unauthorized use of my card and accounts," I said. "The logs identify devices and locations. I'd prefer the university determine the user." That sentence took effort. My anger wanted to say Mira. My strategy said let the logs say it first. Professor Ainsley looked up, and for the first time across 2 lives, she seemed not disappointed but alert. "You understand this may trigger a formal integrity review for both of you." "Yes," I said. My voice did not shake. That already happened to me once in every way that matters. I should not have said that last line. It slipped out, strange and too true. Priya glanced at me. Professor Ainsley paused. "Once," she asked. For a heartbeat, I saw another room, another letter, another version of myself folding under accusation. I swallowed. "It feels like I've been preparing for the consequences for a long time," I said. "Not a lie. Not the whole truth. Rebirth gives you knowledge, but it does not give you permission to sound sane while explaining it." Professor Ainsley accepted the correction, though her eyes lingered on me with curiosity. She promised to contact academic integrity and request preservation of library CCTV and account logs. She also advised me not to communicate directly with Mira. I nearly laughed. Avoiding Mira felt like avoiding smoke after your house had burned down. Still, when I left the office, I felt the ground under me differently. The old timeline had been a tunnel where every authority appeared only after Mira had arranged the lighting. This time, I had reached them while the scene was still raw. Not won, not safe, but present. Sometimes survival is just getting to the room before the liar finishes decorating it. Mira was waiting outside the building. Of course she was. She stood under the dripping edge of the awning, hair damp from rain, eyes red, arms wrapped around herself. A perfect portrait of wounded innocence. 2 students slowed as they passed, ready to witness whatever she wanted them to witness. Priya muttered, "Keep walking." I intended to. Then Mira said, loud enough for the passers-by, "Why are you doing this to me, Lena?" The old script invited me to defend. The new me refused the stage. I stopped, took out my phone, and began recording openly. "I've asked you not to contact me outside official channels," I said. Myra's expression cracked. Only for a blink. Then she stepped closer, tears shining. You're recording me now?
See?
This is what I mean. You're obsessed. One passerby frowned at me. There it was again. She could turn self-protection into aggression just by looking fragile. I held the phone steady. Please move away. Mira lowered her voice, but the recorder caught it. You think those logs prove anything? You gave me the card all semester. You gave me everything. Nobody's going to care when you decided to regret it. My heartbeat slammed once hard. That was not just a threat. It was her philosophy. Consent, to Mira, was a door that could never close once opened. If I had shared yesterday, she owned tomorrow. If I helped once, I owed forever. I looked at her wet, furious face and understood that taking back my library card was not about plastic. It was about time. It was about ownership of my own no. They'll care, I said, because you kept using it after I took it back. She stopped breathing for half a second. Priya saw it too. That evening, the library system sent another automated notice. Attempted access blocked. Cancelled card credentials. Terminal 6. 6:42 p.m. I stared at the email in disbelief. Mira had gone back. She had actually gone back to the same terminal less than 24 hours after being reported and tried the dead credentials again. Some people think manipulators are masterminds. Sometimes they're just addicts, and control is the thing they cannot stop reaching for even when it shocks them. I forwarded the notice to the case Officer Student Services had assigned. Then I sat on the floor of my temporary room and laughed until I cried, because the absurdity of surviving your own destruction only to watch your destroyer lose to a login screen was more than my body could hold. Priya, who had been reviewing metabolic pathways on my bed, looked alarmed. Are you okay? She asked. No, I said, wiping my face. But I'm right. That became our study motto for the next 3 days. No, but I'm right. When a question made us want to scream. No, but I'm right. When old lecture slides contradicted updated notes. No, but I'm right. When Mira walked into the study lounge, saw us, and immediately walked out because Priya lifted her phone like a priest raising a cross. No, but I'm right. For the first time all semester, studying felt like building something inside myself instead of stocking shelves for someone else to raid. The first final was genetics. In the old timeline, I had entered that exam already half dead from accusations, slept 2 hours, and spent the first 10 minutes staring at the paper while Mira wrote smoothly beside me using phrases I recognized from my own notes. This time, I slept 5 hours, ate toast I could barely taste, and arrived early with my new library card, new student ID, and nothing in my pockets except pens and a clear water bottle. The exam hall was a converted gymnasium that smelled like floor polish and fear. Desks stretched in rows under harsh lights. Invigilators moved like solemn birds. Students whispered last-minute facts at each other. Imprinting, penetrance, Robertsonian translocation, non-disjunction, recurrence risk. Mira arrived 5 minutes before doors closed. She looked beautiful in a way that made people underestimate the violence of her panic. Hair sleek, face pale, lips tinted just enough to seem alive. She scanned the seating chart and stiffened. In my first life, she had sat 2 rows behind me, close enough to watch my timing and steal confidence from my pace. This time, because of the active report, Student Services had quietly moved our seats apart. I was in row C, Mira was in row M, near the invigilator station. Her eyes found mine across the hall. I did not smile. I took my seat and placed my new card on the desk for ID check. The invigilator scanned it.
Clean.
Mira watched that scan as if it were a door closing in her face. The exam began with a case about a family history of early-onset colon cancer. In my old life, I had panicked because the wording did not match the bank answer. This time, I read the pedigree twice, underlined ages of onset, and built the reasoning from first principles. Autosomal dominant pattern. Variable expression. Need genetic counseling. Not a memorized paragraph, an argument. Around the hall, pen scratched. A chair squeaked. Someone sniffed every 12 seconds. Halfway through the exam, an invigilator stopped beside Myra's desk. I did not turn my head. I did not need to. The old Lena would have watched, hungry for justice and therefore vulnerable to missing her own paper. The new Lena kept writing. But sound travels in exam halls. I heard the murmur. I heard Mira whisper, "It's just my library access slip." I heard paper move. Then the invigilator's voice, low but firm, "This material is not permitted." My pen paused for 1 second. Then I continued. Later, I learned what happened from Priya, who heard from Sasha, who had finally discovered that being close to a scandal is less fun when it stains your shoes. Mira had brought a folded printout of old case bank answers, not into the exam deliberately, she claimed, but tucked inside her authorized ID documents by accident. The printout had my old student number at the bottom, my canceled card, my name, my ghost from the previous night. If that had happened in the old timeline, I would have been finished. My number on the page, her tears in a room, everyone primed to believe collaboration. But this time, the printout matched the library report I filed before the exam. It matched the pages Mrs. Bell had confiscated. It matched the access timestamp from Terminal 6 when I was documented elsewhere. It matched the dead credentials Mira had tried again after the card cancellation. Evidence is not always a sword. Sometimes it is a net. Mira had been thrashing inside it for 2 days without realizing every movement tightened the weave. I finished the paper with 12 minutes to spare, reviewed my short answers, and changed one phrase about penetrance that would have haunted me later. When the invigilator called time, I put down my pen and felt my whole body shake. Not during. After. Survival often waits until the danger passes before it asks to be felt. Outside the hall, students exploded into the usual post-exam chaos, arguing about question 4, comparing inheritance patterns, declaring themselves doomed in voices full of relief. Mira did not come out with us. She had been escorted to the side office. Sasha stood near the doors, face pale, no longer righteous. Priya touched my shoulder. "Don't look back," she said. I looked anyway. Through the narrow office window, I saw Mira sitting with her hands folded, crying perfectly for 2 invigilators who were not smiling. By sunset, everyone knew something had happened, and nobody knew enough to speak confidently, which of course did not stop them. The rumor mutated hourly. Mira had cheated. No, Lena had planted papers. No, both of them were under investigation. No, the library had been hacked. No, Professor Ainsley had set a trap. My favorite version, delivered by a sleep-deprived boy outside the vending machines, was that the university had embedded invisible ink in restricted printouts to catch a secret cheating ring. I almost wished that one were true. It sounded more glamorous than a tired girl finally saying no. The Academic Integrity Office emailed me at 6:17 p.m. requesting a formal statement. My stomach dropped when I saw the sender, even though I was expecting it. Trauma is not logical. It does not care that this time you are prepared. It hears the same door open and throws you back into the same fire. I sat at the desk in my temporary room, hands numb, and opened a fresh document. The statement took 4 hours. Not because it was long, but because every sentence had to resist the pull of pain. I wanted to write, "Mira destroyed my life once." I wanted to write, "I woke up with the memory of losing everything, and I refused to lose it again." Instead, I wrote dates, times, locations, actions. I wrote that I withdrew permission for card use at approximately 12:05 a.m. in the presence of library staff. I wrote that credentials were canceled. I wrote that subsequent access attempts occurred. I wrote that a flash drive was found and submitted unopened. I wrote like a woman building stairs out of facts to climb out of a grave. Myra's counterstatement arrived 2 days later because Academic Integrity, in its commitment to fairness and emotional torture, shared the portions relevant to me. She claimed I had orchestrated a campaign against her after she refused to keep helping me study. She claimed the flash drive might have been mine. She claimed the printout in her exam documents had been slipped there during the chaos outside the hall. She claimed my sudden room change proved paranoia. She claimed Priya was biased because I had recruited her. Reading it made me feel oddly calm. Lies on paper are less powerful than lies spoken through tears. Paper removes perfume, Trembling hands, wounded eyes. It leaves structure. Myra's structure was weak. She needed me to have planted evidence, hacked my own account, filed reports against myself before knowing she would bring the printout, hidden a flash drive under my own mattress, and somehow forced her to attempt access with my cancelled credentials after being told not to. It was too much. A liar can ask people to believe one unlikely thing. Mira asked them to believe 7 impossible things wearing the same dress. I sent a supplementary statement correcting only factual inaccuracies.
No adjectives. No insults. No speeches.
Then I returned to studying for biochemistry because finals did not pause for vindication. That was another thing revenge stories forget. Even while your enemy burns, you still have to know the urea cycle. The biochemistry final was where Mira truly broke. Not publicly at first. Academically. The paper was cruel in the way good papers are cruel. It rewarded understanding and punished memorized comfort. There was a pathway question that looked like glycolysis until halfway through it became about enzyme regulation under fasting conditions. There was a clinical vignette about a child with vomiting and lethargy that tempted students toward one diagnosis before the lab values redirected the answer. Old case bank keys would not save anyone. You had to think. I saw Mira across the hall with both hands in her hair. She wrote, crossed out, wrote again. At one point, she stared at the ceiling with her mouth slightly open, as if answers might descend from the lights. I did not enjoy that as much as I thought I would. That surprised me. I had imagined her failure would taste sweet. Instead, it tasted like metal, like biting your tongue. Maybe because watching her struggle revealed the smaller tragedy underneath the larger crime. Mira had spent so much energy stealing competence that she never built any. She had turned herself into a person who could only move by leaning on others, and when the supports withdrew, there was nothing majestic about her fall. It was ugly. It was ordinary. It was deserved. Those truths sat together, without canceling each other. After the exam, Mira found me near the lockers. No audience this time. That was how I knew she was desperate. Her beauty had thinned. Foundation clung to dry patches near her nose, and her eyes were bloodshot in a way tears could not decorate. Please, she said. Just one word. I closed my locker slowly. Official channels. I'm not here to threaten you. That would be new. She flinched, and for one dangerous second I saw the girl she might have been if honesty had found her earlier. Then she said, if I fail these finals, I lose my conditional place. There it was. The center of her universe. Not apology. Not harm. Consequence. I looked at her hands, twisting together. In my first life, I had lost my scholarship because of her. My mother had taken extra shifts until her voice cracked. I had stopped answering calls from relatives because shame made even concern feel like accusation. Mira had accepted her award in a white dress. You should have studied, I said. Her face hardened. That's easy for you to say. You have your perfect notes and your sad little discipline. You had access to my notes. Not after you decided to punish me. The words hit so cleanly I almost thanked her. Punishment, to Mira, was losing stolen access. Cruelty was being denied what she had no right to. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I didn't make your answers vanish. I took back my card. Everything that disappeared was never yours.
She slapped me.
Not hard enough to injure, but loud enough to echo off the lockers. For half a second, both of us froze. Mira looked more shocked than I felt. Violence did not fit her preferred costume. It was too direct, too honest. Then footsteps sounded at the end of the corridor. She instantly grabbed her own cheek and stumbled back as if I had struck her. It was so fast that, in another life, it would have worked. But the corridor camera above the lockers blinked red, and Priya, blessed, suspicious Priya, had just turned the corner with Sasha beside her. They saw the end, not the beginning, but this time the end was enough because the camera had seen the rest. Mira began sobbing. She hit me, she cried. Sasha's face twisted, confused, almost ready to believe, because habit is powerful. I did nothing. That was the hardest part.
I did not yell.
I did not defend. I did not touch my cheek though it burned. I looked up at the camera, then at Mira. We should call security, I said. Mira stopped crying for one beat too long. Sasha saw it. Priya definitely saw it. The silence after a failed lie is unlike any other silence. It has teeth. Security reviewed the footage within the hour. Mira claimed emotional distress. She claimed provocation. She claimed she did not remember touching me. The language softened as evidence hardened. That is how institutions protect themselves, and sometimes, accidentally, you. Words like assault became incident. Lying became conflicting accounts until the video made conflict impossible. I received a no-contact directive by email that evening. Mira received one too, along with a notice that the corridor incident had been added to the ongoing review. When I read the email, I did not celebrate. I pressed my fingers lightly to my cheek and sat very still. In my first life, the world had taught me that proof arrived too late, if at all. Now it was arriving almost faster than I could emotionally process. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt grief for the version of me who had not known to stand under cameras, save voice notes, request logs, refuse private conversations. She had not been stupid. She had been untrained in war. I wished I could reach back through time and tell her that being trusting was not a crime, that the shame belonged to the person who exploited it, that one day she would wake up before the printer finished choking and take back the card. The last final was anatomy, the exam Mira had been most confident about in the old timeline because she had stolen my annotated diagrams. I knew because during the misconduct review back then, one of her submitted practice sheets contained the exact silly note I wrote beside the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Don't let it loop you into stupidity. I had been humiliated by that detail, by the intimacy of theft. This time, my diagrams were mine alone, redrawn by hand in the postgraduate wing while rain tapped against the loose window. I studied not with panic, but with a strange, fierce tenderness. This knowledge had been used against me once. Now I took it back too. Not the card, not the account, the work, the hours, the tiny jokes and margins, the confidence built through repetition, the part of me Mira had treated as a public resource. On the morning of anatomy, I wore a navy sweater my mother had mailed me months earlier, along with a note saying, "Proud of you always, not just when results come." In my first life, I had read that note after the allegation and cried because I thought I had made it false. This time, I folded it into my pencil case like a charm. Mira did not sit the anatomy final. At least, not at first. Her seat stayed empty through ID checks, empty through instructions, empty when papers were turned over. 10 minutes in, the side doors opened, and she entered with an academic integrity officer. Her face was bare, hair tied back severely, no performance left except exhaustion. The officer spoke quietly to the chief invigilator, who nodded and led Mira to a separate desk near the front. Later, I learned she had been permitted to sit under special supervision while the investigation continued. That angered some students when the rumor spread, but not me. Let her sit, I thought. Let the paper ask what she knows when nobody else's access wraps around her like a stolen coat. The exam was brutal but fair. Identify structures. Explain clinical correlations. Trace consequences of injury. No answer could be borrowed whole, because every question asked why. Why does damage here cause that symptom? Why does this vessel matter? Why does this developmental error produce this defect? Why, the question thieves hate most. I wrote until my hand cramped. Across the hall, Mira turned pages slowly. Once, she looked at me, not with hatred this time, but with something almost empty. I looked back for only a second. Then I returned to my paper. Her collapse was no longer the center of my story. That, more than anything, felt like victory. When finals ended, the campus exhaled. Students poured onto the lawns, blinking in sunlight like released prisoners. Someone played music from a speaker. Someone else shouted that they never wanted to hear the word mitochondria again. Priya bought fries from the cafeteria and ate them with the solemn joy of a woman returning from battle. I sat beside her under the courtyard tree and checked my phone every 30 seconds despite pretending not to. No results yet. No final integrity decision.
Non attending.
Life, rude as ever, continued in suspense. Sasha approached us after a while, holding 2 coffees like peace offerings. "Can I sit?" she asked. Priya looked at me. I shrugged. Sasha sat on the grass, not too close. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then she said, "I owe you an apology." "Yes," I said. Priya choked on a fry. Sasha looked startled, then laughed weakly. "Okay.
Fair."
I'm sorry I believed her so fast. I liked being the person she cried to. Made me feel important, I guess. That honesty softened something in me despite myself. "She's good at making people feel chosen," I said. "Until you realize you were selected for use." Sasha nodded, eyes wet but not performative. Did she really hide a flash drive? "That's under review."
Right.
Official channels. Priya saluted with a fry. We laughed then, not because anything was fixed, but because the air around us had changed. Myra's spell over the cohort was breaking into ordinary, embarrassing pieces. The academic integrity decision came 5 days after finals. I was in the grocery store holding a discounted bag of apples when the email arrived. My vision blurred so badly, I had to step aside near the cereal shelves. The subject line read, "Outcome of preliminary review." My thumb hovered over it while shoppers moved around me, while a child begged for chocolate cereal, while the world proved it could continue during the exact second my future reopened or closed. I opened it. The review found insufficient evidence of misconduct by me. Insufficient evidence. The phrase was so institutional, so bloodless, so much smaller than innocence, and yet it nearly brought me to my knees. The library logs, CCTV, IT metadata, and witness statements supported unauthorized use of my credentials by another student. My account would be cleared. My scholarship hold, which had been pending automatically due to the report, would be removed. I read those lines again and again until the apples slipped from my hand and rolled across the floor. An older woman helped me pick them up, asking if I was all right. I almost told her I had just returned from the dead and found the exit sign. Instead, I said, "Yes, I think I am." Then I bought the apples because life after vindication apparently still requires groceries. Myra's outcome was not included in full because privacy policies protect even people who try to destroy you. But consequences have shadows, and those shadows moved everywhere. She withdrew from 2 units before results were released. Her conditional placement vanished from her social media bio. Her parents appeared on campus once, her mother walking ahead with a face like carved ice while her father carried boxes from the dorm. The official rumor, which is to say the one assembled from administrative crumbs and student imagination, was that Mira had received a suspension pending a full hearing, a failing grade for at least one final due to unauthorized materials, and a separate conduct sanction for the corridor incident. I did not know what was true. I didn't know her name disappeared from the dean's honor shortlist. I knew Professor Ainsley stopped using her case presentation as an example. I knew Sasha deleted 3 photos with Mira from her profile and pretended it was because the lighting was bad. I knew Priya said, "Don't stalk her downfall," every time she caught me searching. She was right. Obsession is still a chain even when it is attached to your enemy. So I stopped looking. Mostly. Healing is not sainthood. Sometimes I wanted to see the tower finish falling. Sometimes I remembered I had exams to pass and a life to live. Results came out on a Friday morning, so bright it felt insulting. I checked mine alone in the postgraduate room, sitting on the bed, because the desk chair still wobbled. Genetics. High distinction. Biochemistry. Distinction. Anatomy. High distinction. My overall average not only survived, it rose. For a while, I did not move. Success after fear feels unreal. Almost suspicious, like someone else's coat placed around your shoulders. Then I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, breathless from work.
Elena?
"Are you okay?" That question had carried so much dread in my first life. I closed my eyes. "I passed," I said. "I passed well." There was silence, and then my mother made a sound I had never heard before, something between a laugh and a sob. "Of course you did," she said, as if faith were easy, as if the universe had not once taught us otherwise. I did not tell her everything. Not yet. I told her there had been a difficult situation, that it was resolved, that my scholarship was safe. She said she was proud of me, always, not just when results come. I pressed my hand over my eyes and cried, because this time the sentence did not feel like mercy. It felt like truth. A week later, Mrs. Bell called me to the library desk. The new semester had not started, so the building had returned to its natural state. Quiet, dusty, full of students pretending they would be organized next term. She handed me a sealed envelope. "Your permanent replacement card," she said. And something else. Inside was a printed summary of my restored account access and a small note in her careful handwriting. "Keep your card close. Not everyone who asks is borrowing." I laughed softly. "You should put that on a poster." "I should put it on the entrance," she said. Then her expression gentled. "You did well, Miss Marrow. Many students wait too long." My throat tightened. In another life, I had waited until waiting became evidence against me. "I know," I said. She studied me as if the words carried more weight than they should. Then the printer behind her started up, smooth this time, no choking, no grinding. Just paper moving cleanly through the machine. I looked at it and felt the strangest shiver, as if the universe had repeated the opening note in a different key. Mrs. Bell followed my gaze. "Temperamental thing," she said. "Breaks whenever students need it most." "Maybe it knows," I replied. She raised an eyebrow. I slipped the new card into my zipper pocket and smiled. "Maybe it warns people." I ran into Mira one last time before winter break. Not in a dramatic hallway, not under storm clouds, not with witnesses waiting to gasp. It happened at the bus stop outside campus, where ordinary life has a cruel talent for placing enemies under the same shelter. She looked thinner, dressed in a black coat, hair tucked under a scarf. Without her audience, she seemed smaller but not softer. For a minute, we stood apart in the cold, watching traffic hiss over a wet road. I could have ignored her. I should have. Then she said, "Are you happy?"
No tears. No tremble.
Just a flat little question. I turned my head. Her eyes were fixed on the street. In my first life, I had imagined confronting her with a speech that would make her understand every ounce of harm. But people like Mira do not understand harm by receiving descriptions of it. They understand only loss, and even then they mistake it for persecution. "I'm free," I said. "That's better." She laughed once, bitterly. "You think you're different from me because you won." "No," I said. "I think I'm different because when I was scared, I still did my own work." Her jaw tightened. "You ruined my life over a library card." The bus headlights appeared in the distance. I looked at her then, really looked, and felt no surge of hatred, no pity strong enough to endanger me, only a final clean distance.
No, mira.
I took back my library card. "Your life was attached to what you borrowed." The bus arrived with a sigh of brakes. I stepped on first. She did not follow. Sometimes I wonder why rebirth brought me back to that exact moment. Not the bus accident. Not the misconduct hearing. Not the day I first gave Mira my PIN, which would have been cleaner, easier, almost merciful. Instead, I woke at the printer, with her hand already in her pocket and the stolen pages already warm in the tray. Maybe second chances do not begin before the damage. Maybe they begin at the first moment you are finally willing to interrupt it. That is less comforting, but more useful. We cannot always prevent people from taking. We do not always recognize theft when it arrives smiling and says please. But we can learn the shape of our own boundary. We can take back the card. We can change the password. We can stop explaining our no as if it needs a scholarship, a committee, or a tragedy to be valid. I used to think kindness meant leaving doors open. Now I know kindness without locks invites people who call themselves guests while measuring the furniture. My new library card stayed in my zipper pocket after that. My notes stayed in folders only I controlled. My friendships changed too. Fewer people had access to me. Better people did. The next semester, Professor Ainsley asked if I would help run a study skills session for incoming students. At first, I thought she meant genetics review, note-taking, exam planning. Then she sent the topic, academic boundaries and resource sharing. I stared at the email so long Priya leaned over my shoulder and burst out laughing.
Iconic, she said.
Absolutely not, I said. 10 minutes later, I replied yes. The session took place in the same library seminar room where Mira had once charmed half our cohort into lending her everything from lab coats to login details. 23 first years attended, most of them nervous, over-caffeinated, and heartbreakingly eager to be liked. I looked at their open faces and saw myself everywhere. I did not tell them my whole story. I did not say rebirth. I did not say Myra's name. I said, sharing notes can be generous. Sharing credentials can destroy you. Know the difference. A boy in the front row raised his hand and asked, but what if saying no makes things awkward? I smiled because the question deserved tenderness. Then it's awkward, I said. Awkward is survivable. Misconduct records are harder. They laughed, but they wrote it down. I watched their pens move and felt something inside me settle. Revenge ends when the villain falls. Healing begins when the lesson no longer belongs only to your wound. After the session, a quiet girl lingered near the door. She had sleeves pulled over her hands and the anxious posture of someone used to apologizing before speaking. Can I ask something? She said. Of course. She looked toward the hallway, then back at me. My roommate keeps asking to use my database login because hers glitches. She says I'm selfish if I don't help. There it was. Not the same story, but the same doorway. My chest tightened. For a second, I saw the printer, the pocket, the pages. Then I took a blank card from the seminar table and wrote 3 steps on it. Reset password, report access issue. Offer to walk her to IT. I handed it to the girl. If her login really glitches, IT can help her. If she refuses IT and only wants yours, the glitch is not the problem. The girl read the card, and her shoulders dropped as if someone had loosened ropes. Thank you, she whispered. I watched her leave and realized my second life had already moved beyond saving me. It had begun saving the versions of me I would never meet. Priya and I became friends in the unglamorous way real friendships form. Shared calendars, ugly laughter, emergency snacks, honest criticism, silence that did not demand payment. She never asked to see my notes without offering hers. She never touched my laptop. She once borrowed my charger and returned it labeled with my name because, as she said, we respect property in this household. Sasha orbited for a while, guilty and eager, and eventually settled into something like a friend too, though with boundaries thick enough to survive weather. I learned not every person who believes a lie is your enemy forever. Some are lazy. Some are lonely. Some like drama until it asks them to testify. Forgiveness, I discovered, is not the same as reopening access. I could accept Sasha's apology and still never tell her anything I would not want repeated in a crowded elevator. That was not bitterness. It was architecture. A rebuilt life needs walls placed where the old one collapsed. Months passed. The library replaced the old printers with sleek new machines that required tap authentication for every page. Mrs. Bell claimed it was part of a scheduled upgrade. Priya claimed I personally changed university infrastructure through trauma. I claimed nothing, but every time someone tapped their card and waited for their own documents to release, I felt a petty little spark of satisfaction. The system now required presence. No more printing under someone's name from a terminal across the room. No more warm pages waiting in trays like unattended evidence. During midterms, I saw the quiet first year from my session at IT services with her roommate beside her, both getting separate access issues resolved. The roommate looked annoyed. The quiet girl looked relieved. I bought myself a coffee afterward and sat by the courtyard statue, thinking about how some victories are invisible because they prevent disasters that never get named. Nobody applauds the locked door that keeps the thief outside. Nobody writes awards for changed passwords. But entire futures turn on those tiny acts of refusal. I did not hear from Mira again until spring. Her email arrived from a personal account because the university one had apparently been suspended or closed. The subject line was blank. For 10 minutes, I considered deleting it unread. Then I opened it because I was still human and curiosity remains the dumbest surviving organ. The message was short. She wrote that she hoped I was satisfied. She wrote that she had transferred institutions. She wrote that people make mistakes under pressure, and I had chosen to be merciless. She wrote that one day I would need help and nobody would give it to me.
No apology. No ownership.
Just the same old mirror turned outward. I felt the old anger rise, then fade faster than expected. Her words no longer entered me like commands. They tapped the glass from outside. I did not reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to the no-contact case address, archived it, and opened my anatomy revision. That was the day I understood she had truly lost power over me. Not when she was caught. Not when my name was cleared. Not when her borrowed answers vanished. She lost power when I no longer needed her to admit what she had done in order for me to know it was real. Years from now, people may remember the scandal in simplified form. They might say Mira cheated with old answers. They might say I exposed her. They might say finals week was dramatic that year, as if drama were weather and not a series of choices. They will not remember the printer choking, the warmth of the stolen card, the way my hand did not shake when I asked for it back. They will not remember the flash drive in a zip bag, the apples rolling across the grocery aisle, the first-year girl folding my advice card into her sleeve. But I will. I remember all of it because my life split there, at a library table under fluorescent lights, between the girl who lent pieces of herself until nothing was left and the woman who learned to close her hand. Rebirth did not make me cruel. It made me precise. It taught me that a boundary is not a betrayal. It is a record of where you begin. So when people ask me why I am careful now, why I never share cards, passwords, drafts, or access just for a minute, I do not give them the whole story. Most people do not need the whole story. They need the rule. I tell them borrowed answers vanish. I tell them stolen work rots in the hands that hold it. I tell them if someone's survival depends on your silence, your login, your fear of being called selfish, then what they are building is not friendship. It is a trap with your name printed at the bottom. And I tell them this: the moment you take back what was always yours, the world may call you cruel, dramatic, paranoid, cold. Let it. The world is often loudest right before it updates its records. The library is quiet tonight. I am sitting at table 14 again, not because I am haunted, but because I refuse to surrender places where I once felt small. My new card rests beside my laptop. My name shines under clean laminate. Across the room, a printer releases pages one by one, each waiting for its rightful owner to tap and collect. The sound is steady, almost gentle. Outside, rain threads silver lines down the windows. Finals are over. My account is clear. My future, which once felt like a locked archive under someone else's hand, is open in front of me. I slide my card into my pocket before I leave, zipper closed, and smile at the tiny click. It is not a dramatic sound. It would not frighten anyone who did not know better. But I know better. It is the sound of a door locking behind me, and for once, every borrowed answer stays gone.